I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 127. Today in the show, Dan and I are sharing with you our rut hunting experiences from the past couple weeks, the ups, the downs, and the lessons learned. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today on the show, we have two stories of the 2016 whitetail rut. One is of resounding success, and the other is of utter despair.
Come on, man. It's not that bad.
One is Dan Johnson's, and one is mine. But quickly, before we get to these stories and lessons learned, we need to thank our partners at Sitka Gear for their support of this podcast. And today, rather than our usual short Sitka story, this entire podcast will be a Sitka story, as all the hunts you'll hear about today from Dan and I took place while wearing our Sitka. So if you personally would like to learn more about Sitka's technical hunting apparel, which has helped me and Dan weather the elements successfully over the recent days, head on over to sitkagear.com. And now, Dan, tell me, how are you feeling right now?
Woo!
Yes, sir.
No, man, I'm happy.
I bet.
It's crazy. Just so many emotions. And things that go through your head after you shoot a deer, and you think about what you've done, the past, what you've done wrong, what you've done right, what you've, and then it's like a day passes and now I'm already thinking about 2017. So it's crazy.
I know. I'm super excited for you. And if anyone hasn't been following social media, they're probably freaking out right now and wondering what exactly happened, and we will get to that. But I don't know, Dan, I kind of want to hear about what's going on with you first, because you've got the best stories to share. Do you want to start from the beginning with way back since we last talked, and then just take us up through what's happened most recently with your hunts?
Right. Sure. Oh man, when was the last time we talked? Because I actually missed a buck or hit a limb or something. It was one of the. I'll just kind of tell the story.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about that yet. I think we haven't talked since the end of October, because we had recorded that one early. So
yeah.
It's been a good 10 to 14 days since we've actually got new stuff.
Right. Well, I just want to kind of tell a really quick story before I go into that one. I had the opportunity. My stepdad, I was actually back home hunting my main farm, and I brought my daughter with me, and she was hanging out with my mom, her grandma, and my stepdad that morning shot a buck on the property that they live on. It's only 7 acres, and
that's awesome. He got one back there.
It's just a little, a little spike basically.
Right. That's cool.
Actually, there's a law in Iowa. He didn't know it because when it came through, it was really dark, and it was just, there was 1-2 inches of bone sticking out of his head. He thought it was a doe and he shot it. But the rule in Iowa is you can put your doe tag on it if the antlers are not forked. So, so that he didn't see it. He thought it was a doe. He had a doe tag. Luckily, when he shot it, so all that played out fine, legal, and all that. But the cool thing about that was I helped. I took some pictures. I helped him track the blood trail. He only went about 50 yards, and I had the opportunity to take my daughter, who's 3 years old, out, and my mom carried her into the woods after we found the deer, and just to see the look on her face. And she asked so many questions, and it's almost like I wish I had more to say to her, because I as a father, I was ill prepared for that moment of my life.
Right.
It's like, so Daddy, is this buck dead? Or is this deer dead? Yes, honey, that's deer. Why did they kill it? Because, they're taught, you can't hurt things. You're not supposed to hurt other humans or hit or kick, or bite. So why did Grandpa kill this deer? I'm like, well, Grandpa killed this deer to turn it into meat for, for our food, so we can eat it. It provides us food. And she's like, oh, okay. And then, I had to tell her, just kind of work in, God created these animals for us. And it's our responsibility to, when we shoot them, we got to put a good shot on them so they don't go very far. And, and she's just asking, questions about the broadhead. And she's like, is this what poked the deer? And it was a first for me. And I thought it was really cool.
That is so cool. Did she ask you anything that you didn't know how to answer?
Did the buck die, or is the buck dead, or is the deer dead? Is the deer dead? I'm just like, yeah, the deer's dead. She's like, oh, that's sad, So there was emotion involved. There was a little bit more emotion for her involved in it. And there wasn't a lot of blood because it was a good shot, and he fell over fairly quickly. And I wiped the blood off of his nose before she got there, and I just had to basically shoot from the hip and try to figure out what to say right then and there. And I think I did a decent job of just telling her, we're gonna turn this into food so we can eat it with our potatoes and carrots, and so
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I imagine that's got to be just like one of the coolest things. Like when I think about future kids, that's like one of the types of things that I imagine being like so, I don't know, so fulfilling, being able to share moments like that.
Right. And it was cool. My mom was there and my stepdad was there, and they got to experience that little moment too. And I took some pictures, and I haven't posted them yet, but I'm gonna post them here in a little bit, of her, just like the expressions on her face, like, oh my gosh, this is cool. But I don't know, like she liked it, but she wasn't like overboard. Like my son, I just know when I do that with him, he's gonna be like riding it, touching it, and like petting it and stuff like that. She was just a little leery of that, of it. So I got to do my part. Like when I told her that I shot my buck this year, she was, oh yeah, Dad, good job. You shot a big buck. That's awesome, Dad. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna turn it into food so we can eat it. Yeah, I'm gonna eat deer meat. So she was all jacked up about that, and that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So did she see your buck too?
She never got to see it because I took it to the taxidermist before I ended up bringing it back home.
Okay.
But I showed her pictures, and she's like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to shoot a buck someday too, Dad, right? Right, Dad, right? I'm like, heck yeah, you are. Come hunt. When you're old enough, you can come hunting with Daddy.
Well, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that story because, oftentimes we talk a lot about strategy on this and how to actually kill the deer, but it's the moments like that for me now as a father that have a little light shine on them as well. So
no, that's great. I love it. Love that story.
Now let's forget about all that BS, right? Now let's talk about the meat and potatoes.
So what happened after all this?
Okay, so I ended up going back home for a couple, for the last week of work. I ended up working a Monday, and it was that weekend before Halloween. It was the very first morning hunt on my buddy's property, and the evening before, I saw an absolute giant buck. Just like 400 yards away on a neighboring property. He was in one of the guy's food plots. He's got like 140 acres over there, and it's basically no timber, but it's all food plot. So it's standing corn. It's like those tripod houses, those hunting houses.
Yeah.
And I think he muzzleload hunts. He lets a couple guys bow hunt over there. And there's a tree line that all these deer come through. Well, there's a sliver of property that runs between the property that I can hunt and the property where all these deer are coming. I have a sliver of it's basically this giant pinch point that I talk about on my buddy's property that all the deer work through. And I think I've told you in previous podcast last year, I was having trouble trying to figure out how this wind.
Yes, I remember this. Yep.
This wind goes back and forth. So what I found was I have to get into the low spots, and I have to basically hunt these stands where a north and a south wind are both bad. So not only am I the wind direction, because the wind direction comes like a tide, it goes back and then it goes forth when the wind blows hard. So if it's a north wind, I'll have a pretty consistent north wind, but when the wind dies down, it's like everything floods back down to the low ground.
Yikes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I have to hunt this area where a north wind is bad and a south wind is bad, meaning I have to go in there for only a south wind, but I have to know that the south and the north are both bad.
So you're just praying that they come from the east or west.
No, I'm praying that they walk through, because the pinch point's so tight. I'm praying that they come through that exact pinch point, and I have a shooting lane to the north and I have a shooting lane to the south.
Gotcha.
So if there's an east wind, I'm screwed. If there's a west wind, I'm screwed. But I have to. So I figured out that's basically 2 tree stand locations, and if they come too high to the south, if they come through to the north, they're not going to really bust me, because they're clear on the other side of the property, past the creek, and they walk through that ozonic stream, and they don't hear nothing, or they don't smell nothing. However, these deer are hunted hard, and I think I told you I had a doe step out at about 120 yards from me and walk out in this little grassy area, which is somebody's backyard, and just, kind of feed towards me. And I did not move one muscle, and she pegged me at like 100 yards. So I'm just like, oh my God, how did she? I didn't do anything, but she pegged me. The wind isn't in her favor. That's just how spooky these deer are. They are so observant because they get hunted quite a bit in this area. So, let's fast forward to the good part. That first morning that I was able to hunt on my buddy's property, the previous night I passed a little, I think he's an 8-pointer, probably a 125, class 3-year-old, nothing exciting. The next morning he came through again, and I passed him, but following right behind him, all I saw was a big dark body. And then I saw, I put my binos up, and from what I could see, there was these huge bases. And so I go, oh, that looks like a shooter. And it was one of these things where I was so caught up in the moment that I did not do a very good job of observing the actual body size of this buck. I don't know if you've ever done that, and you just like, you're so focused on, I gotta kill. Right. And so he came up, he made a scrape. Well, between the time he made a scrape and the time that he was going to follow this other buck out through one of my shooting lanes, 3 does came in behind me and busted me moving. and they blew and they blew and they blew. They blew. And then they ended up just kind of walking away from me. But it's crazy out there because the deer blow so much that the bucks don't even care about it.
So he was just chilling there?
He was just chilling. Of course he was focused right on this, these does. And he was like, okay, what's the problem? Because he doesn't smell me.
Right.
He doesn't see me. All these does are blowing, and he's like, what's going on? These women are just crazy. So they work their way away, and he kind of puts his nose to the ground. He's looking at this buck, and he's looking in this direction. And I haven't had the opportunity to stand up quite yet, because as I'm standing up, these does bust me. So I slowly sit back down and just kind of wait it out, thinking the hunt's over. Does work their way. I stand up, grab my bow, and this buck starts working out again. And he's in a shooting lane. I see his antlers. They're out to his ears. They're I don't know. And he's maybe a 135-10, 130. But I swear to God, he looked 160, right? All day long. Oh my God. I was just so fired up because it was the first interaction. It's almost like I forgot everything that I learned in the last, 10, 15 years of bow hunting. Right. It's like, what did you learn? Nothing. It's big buck, got to shoot it. And I drew back. I let the arrow go, and something happened. I either just got buck fever and shanked it, but when I found the arrow, the broadhead was off of it and the knock was off of it. So I think I hit a branch or something. Well, checking the trail cameras and after watching him run away, it sucks to say, but I'm glad I missed him and missed him clean. I didn't hit him. I didn't wound him. I missed him clean. And after I looked at trail camera pictures, I'm like, that's a 3-year-old. Yeah. Right. So I'm just like, whew, maybe I won't tell anybody about this hunt.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So how were you feeling right after that though?
Oh, I was pissed. I called my wife and I'm like, man, I just missed a big buck. And that was before I looked at trail camera pictures and found out this buck was not a shooter. And she's like, why'd you miss? Like, I wish I knew. Right. I wish I knew. So that was one of these encounters where it's time, it taught me something because it helped me down the road this year.
So I imagine, in like the hours after that, like you're thinking through everything that happened, everything that went wrong. Like, did you analyze it and figure out anything other than the possibility that you hit a limb? Was there anything that you told yourself, I think I should have done this differently, or I think I could do this better? Or was there any like aha moment for you after like replaying it in your head?
Yeah. And I think I straight up rushed the shot, straight up. My own fault. I think I tried to pull off a shot where the deer may have already seen me or was on edge because those does were blowing, or the fact that I got buck fever and straight up rushed the shot. That's just admitting that I made a mistake. Yeah,
man, I think it happens to just about all of us. I don't think there's a few people maybe out there that are just stone cold, but it's pretty hard to always have it 100% composed in those moments. We always try to get better, but it's pretty hard to be perfect. That's for sure.
Yep, that's a fact.
But I'm glad it was a clean miss. That's the best possible scenario to come out of that.
That's right. So I go back to work on Monday. I end up going trick-or-treating with my wife and kids. Didn't hunt at all on Monday on Halloween, which I wish I would have, because I go back and I check my trail cameras and there's a stud buck walking through at like 2:15, 2:30.
Really?
Yeah. On Halloween through that pinch point. And
midday
movement. So anyway, that passed. I went back out there that evening and hunted again. And I got into the timber on November 1st at about I don't even know, like 1:30, 2 o'clock. So at about 3 o'clock, I saw the buck that I actually missed walk back through this area, 3 days after I missed him, and head to those fields, past a couple other small bucks out of this pinch point. And then the next morning, because of that wind, and I ended up having to move farms. I had a bad wind, so I didn't hunt that morning. So I decided, okay, November 1st, I'm going to go back down to my main farm, and I'll hunt that evening. So I get to my main farm pretty early. I checked a whole bunch of trail cameras, and through flipping through these trail cameras on, let's see, it would have been November 1st, I ended up seeing a mature buck working a field edge, captured on one of my trail cameras. So as a hunter, I'm like, okay, what's my goal this year? I said it's to shoot a 4-year-old buck, right? Mm-hmm. Antler size does not matter to me. I want to my goal, and like I told you earlier this year, my goal is to shoot a 4-year-old buck. So I see a 4-year-old buck on trail camera. So it's like, why not go set up on this where this buck was seen? I hop in this fence line, and I'm hunting a field edge, but one side's an ag field, the other side is kind of like this marshy area, and it's a gigantic staging area / bedding area for a lot of deer. And when it's right, that marsh is on and cracking for the rut. And so I set up, I sit there, and I see a couple does. Fast forward a couple hours, it's like 4:00. I see a couple does work through. They kind of do this big loop around. It's almost like they're scent checking the marsh to try to catch it and see if there's anything in that field before they step out. Well, a small buck stands up out of a bed.
So time out.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
What was your thought process in setting up where you did? Did you set up there just like right over near where the camera picked him up, or is this based on where you saw him come out, or how did you choose where to sit specifically?
Yep. Okay. So, and I should have said this earlier, but this buck was working working a scrape line basically, and there's like 5 or 6 scrapes along this ag field. It's a picked cornfield, and I don't have permission to hunt the marsh, but I do have permission to hunt the ag field of it. All right. So there's like very, very little cherries to choose from.
Okay. I know that feeling.
Yep. So I just get up there, I set the stand up, and I basically am setting it up for an observation stand and hoping, and with the ability to shoot 2 of these scrapes, and they're fresh scrapes, right? Probably were made when this buck came through on Halloween night. He was there the 31st. I hunted, which would have been the first night I hunted there was November 2nd. All right. Did the run and gun, and went in there and didn't see. I saw those does, right? Saw this little dink buck stand up and start chasing these does away. Well, something happened, and I think this buck that I ended up shooting was also bedding in that area, and he was bedding in this area specifically to catch does in between their bedding, using this marsh as a staging area, right? And then he would scent check them as they would go to the ag field, and if they were hot, then he would pursue. But it was still to the point, where it's still that they're not ready yet, so they're up on their feet, but they're not breeding. Mm-hmm. That quote unquote kind of pre-rut time. And I see a big buck stand up kind of at last light. I couldn't really tell what his antlers were, but I knew he was big, and he started chasing these does hard. I think one was a yearling and one was a mature doe. And then that was it. The sun went down. They chased him back into the timber, and nothing happened. Well, November 3rd comes along, and thunderstorms all day long. I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, man, should I even get into the timber? And I had the opportunity to hunt until like 8 or 9 o'clock before the rain started in. And I typically don't do this, but to the north, it was lightning a lot. so I went into this giant ridge stand where I could see, had the opportunity to see forever. I saw a couple good deer, but they were so far away that I didn't, there was nothing to do. The front came in while I was in the stand, and then it started to rain. And I get down, go home, and I'm sitting there all day. I do some work, write some articles, do some social media stuff, and thinking I'm going to get rained out. And it's funny because I'm sitting there on social, doing my Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and it looks like I'm going to get rained out. And basically, guys are calling me a pussy online.
I'm pretty sure I left a comment, just said, I think I said boo or something like that.
Right. So it's like, I'm getting called out here. So I can't get called out.
No, you can't let that happen.
I can't let that happen. So luckily I did. And I didn't get set up until 4:00. I waited until the rain stopped. I left the house at 3:00. I got into the stand at 4:15 is when I looked up, and I was set up because that stand was already there. So all I had to do, climb up, strap in, and hang my bow.
Yep.
And I end up seeing 2 does work their way in as I'm hooking up, but it's still kind of misting. And they're looking up at me, but they're not doing anything. They're not blowing. They're just kind of looking up at me. And I think they're just kind of disoriented because of all the strong winds and rains that had just happened. And they didn't really know what I was. I was in my camo up in a tree, and unlike the other property that I hunt, these deer can be kind of dumb when they see people in the trees because it's not a high pressure farm, so to speak. And they end up kind of getting really, really, really kind of spooked out, and then not really, but they're getting kind of spooked out. So they're bounding away and whatever. And so I'm texting my buddy right here as it's drizzling, and he's like, I'm in a ground blind right now, and I am seeing a couple deer kind of spar with each other. Kind of spar with each other. And I'm sorry, but you're probably hearing a kid cry in the background.
I am hearing a kid cry. That's all right.
The life of a podcaster whose wife also does a daycare out of the house. But anyway, this my buddy's like, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of deer sparring. And I text another buddy. He's like, yeah, I just watched two deer kind of tickle each other's antlers. I'm like, I'm gonna rattle. Blindly, right? This is going to be a blind rattle. This cold front just kind of came through, and it wasn't really even a cold front. It just rained, right? Because the temperature stayed the same before and after it happened. And I throw the antlers together real hard for about 2 minutes, and I hang them down. I sit down. About 2 minutes later, I look over, and this buck is standing at the end of this finger in this marsh, and he's working his way right towards me. And
at that moment, what goes
at that
through your
moment,
head?
First off, the first thing that went through my head is, you missed a buck earlier because you overreacted. Get your shit together, right?
Yep.
Grab the binos, identify the buck. Okay. I see it's a 10-pointer. All right. Look at his body. Okay. That's a 4-year-old. Okay, that's the buck on the trail camera that you said you were going to shoot. Binos down, grab the bow. So, I'm sorry, this kid's going bananas in the room next.
That's all right.
I'm sorry. Do you have an editing tool for editing out crying babies?
We don't have a crying baby edit tool, but we have understanding listeners. So
okay, good. So this buck is on a frozen rope right to me. Like, he's not trying to walk around anything. He's walking back, and I'm looking at him, and then I start to get excited because he's bristled up, his ears are back, and he's drooling. Like, he's licking his lips, snot just coming out of him, and he's just hunched over. And he's not a long bodied buck, but he looks like a pit bull, right? He's all shoulders, all neck. And it was one of these deer that just makes you look at him, go, he's mature, right? He's a mature buck. And so he's getting ready to, at about 25 yards, step out into this into this one of the shooting lanes, and I didn't trim any shooting lanes. It was just kind of a get up there, see what happens. And I'm getting ready to draw back, but he does a hard right turn and he walks the fence line of this marsh, or he kind of steps over the fence first and then takes this hard right turn and he's walking right to me. So my 25-yard shot now becomes he's head on and there's like 3 trees in this fence row. So I have no shot. The next time I have a shot, he's going to be 5 yards, if not closer to me.
Okay.
So he stops and he stops for just a second to the point, or just long enough to where I'm going, oh boy, what did he catch my scent? Because I had it angled to where if he would have walked past that initial shooting lane, he would have caught me, right? So it was a northwest wind, and if I had a straight north wind, it would have been blowing right down into the shooting lane. Now, me and you talk a lot about cutting the wind, right?
Right.
So you have to be aggressive to the point where the shot has to come right before you get busted, right? And that's how I set up this particular tree stand and hunted this particular wind. And he's standing there and I'm thinking, oh boy, did he smell something? Did he smell me? But he's just kind of observing. His body didn't change. Like he was still in that aggressive state. His ears came forward a little bit to look around, right, but he was still drooling and slobbering and he's still bristled up.
Now, you weren't drawn back yet, right?
Not yet.
Now, what were you waiting for? What was was there a
he
spot?
Was
he going to go behind something or?
Yep. He was the only point at this point. He was about 10 yards from me, but the only spot I could see was his left antler and his hindquarters. I had no vitals and he was still hard quartering towards me. Right.
Okay.
So he keeps walking all the way back to this, or like past these 2 trees. I'm excited right now. I'm pumped because I'm reliving this moment. But he walks out of this tree. He walks out. After he walks by that tree, he walks into this little green shrub. No shot. He steps out and he's 5 yards from my tree stand. So I'm shooting straight down at him. Right? Almost. Let the arrow go. I didn't even try to stop him because he was walking really slow, and I spined him. And he dropped straight down in his tracks. I freaked out for like 1 second, like, oh, I just shot a buck. And then I saw him flopping, and then I turned back into finish him off mode, grabbed another arrow, knocked it, launched it right in his heart, dead. And I sat down. I hung my bow up. I sat down. I'm like, oh boy. Like, what do I do? Like, cause I haven't shot a buck since 2012.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And
sounds right.
Like all this, I kind of had like flashbacks of all these mineral stations, all these trail cameras, all these run and gun sets, all the years past. Right. And it finally kind of clicked for me. It's like, put up your trail cameras, find where the action is, and go set up on the action. It's like, it's that simple, for me anyway. Right. I don't know. And so I pick up the phone, I call my wife, and my wife is just, yeah, that away, buddy. Like she's just, this year she was really supportive of me. And I had, going into this rut, I had until November 17th until I had to go back to work. So I was ready to grind it.
Right.
And I killed 2 days into my rutcation. So it's like I called my stepdad. He helped me drag it out, and he ended up dying right there where I shot him. And it's just, he's not a giant antlered deer, which I don't even care about. He is a mature deer. I thought he was a 4-year-old, but I took him to the taxidermist, and his head is gigantic, right? He's got the biggest neck of any deer I've ever shot.
Yeah, I saw in that picture. I was like, man, he's got a big old neck on him.
Right. His body's short. He's a brute. He's still a heavy deer. He's well over 250. But I take him to the taxidermist, and the taxidermist's like, holy cow, that's a big big deer, like big bodied deer. His head is huge. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you've ever walked into a taxidermist and you're so proud of your buck. You're walking in there, you walk in the door and everybody else is dropping their deer off or he's got mounts there and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
just kind of there's a booner, there's a booner, there's a booner. A guy walks in with like 180 class non-typical while I was there. And I'm just like, yeah, this guy was mature. Like, I don't know. I thought that was funny, but
yeah, in Iowa, you've got some serious competition to stack up
Right.
against.
right. But the guy's looking at it and he goes, man, I don't think a regular mount is going to be good. Like a regular mount. So he shows me, he opens this catalog, right? And he's flipping through these forms that the hide goes over, right? And he's like, I think we're going to need one of these mounts. And it is a mount specifically for Canadian deer who are like bigger necked, bigger
Yes.
bodied
Yep.
animal.
I've seen
So
that
I'm
one.
just like, yes, like that to me jacked me up. And it was like, yeah, you may have a big rack, but my buck's a badass, right? So
That is awesome.
and other than that, it's just like get the pictures done. We had them processed, all the way processed in, the end of the next day. And I got a really bad case of poison ivy because of, dragging them out of the thick stuff, but it's all worth it. Right.
Very true.
So
So what is your biggest lesson learned from this whole thing?
oh man, for me, it was, I'm starting to understand, especially for a family man, that there are times where you want to hunt, but you probably shouldn't. That's one thing. It's like, okay, I went out this year and I love hunting and I love being outside, and I've had some good encounters in what we would consider off condition days. But, I think I'm learning this year that, we talk a lot about first time in, best time in.
Mm-hmm.
I only sat that particular tree. That was the second time I sat in that tree. And that was the first time all year I sat in a tree stand more than 2 times.
Yeah. Wow.
So I didn't ever double up on tree stands or locations. I didn't ever, I was going where the sign was at. I was being as mobile as possible. I was doing what I had conditioned myself to do throughout the years. And that was, have your trail cameras tell the story. Where are the deer at? Okay. If there's nothing showing up, you got to go somewhere else on these trail cameras. If there's, bucks that are coming through in the middle of the night, it's pointless to hunt that area because there's no sign of them coming in during shooting light anyway. So
Right.
A picture at midnight is like no picture at all when you're trying to hunt them. I saw this picture of this buck. It was at last light on Halloween, meaning he's going to make himself visible in this marsh before then. And that was my best intel. So I set up in that area, and lo and behold, he was there before, he was pulled away by a hot doe, and I had the opportunity to capitalize because of the information my trail cameras told me, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, that's awesome, man.
So
it's nice
yeah,
when a plan comes together.
and it's not like there was even a plan. It was literally the starting point of what I wanted to do for the next, 17 days 15, 16 days. I just started. There's a lot of luck in what happened to me as well.
Yeah.
I luckily ran into a place where a buck walked in front of my trail camera. I climbed up in after a rainstorm, and that buck just so happened to be bedded in that marsh.
But I think when you look at these types of situations like this, there's always going to be an element of luck, but the luck wouldn't have been able to play its part if you hadn't done a whole bunch of little things that allowed that to happen. So, for example, you hunted on a day when it was rainy, and a lot of people maybe wouldn't have gone out and hunt that day, but you did, and you were there after the front passed and that deer was on its feet. You you planned your wind right and you made sure that you weren't going to be blowing your wind into that swamp and stuff. Some guys might have tromped in there and didn't care about the wind and would have blew them out before you even had a chance to shoot them. Right. I bet you the tree you picked, there's probably some experience and some things you learned in the past that helped you pick the right tree to sit in that night. I bet all of your experience and the things you've done doing so many run and gun setups, the day before when you set that stand up, you probably did it really quietly and slowly enough that you didn't spook that deer that maybe was bedded close by. I bet there's so many little things like that. I always try to look at my hunts, when I have like a close encounter that goes wrong versus a close encounter where I actually seal the deal. And when you start looking at all these tiny little things, there's usually a bunch of these things that if I hadn't done this one little thing, I never would have been able to kill that buck. It's like that one limb. Right. Sometimes you don't trim the one tiny limb, and that's why you couldn't kill him. And then sometimes you do trim that one little limb, and then that's where you got the shot. I think there's a lot of things like that probably.
And I guess I didn't really think about it, but and I have a problem with overanalyzing things too much. This year, my goal was to be more fluid in my approach. And what I mean by that is let the sign or the information you have dictate where you're going to hunt, right? Don't say, oh man, but this area looks good, or this area looks better, or if I go one tree over, maybe I'll do it, but it's a little bit more risky, or, it's like for me, it just happened this year. I didn't put a lot of thought into anything that I was really doing. I used the information that I had from, seasons past, and what I've conditioned myself to do over my years as a bow hunter. I'm not trying to make myself sound like this God's gift to bow hunting, but for me, it happened, right? If that makes sense.
It does. Sometimes that's how it goes, right? Sometimes you just have to be out there and play as many of your cards right as you can and then hope it works out.
Yep. That's a fact, man.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome, dude. Yeah.
I'm pumped. I'm trying to figure out, I got a couple months to figure out where I'm going to hang them. And, I'm just so blessed, and like I said to you, after when I called you that night or that next day, I shot that buck and I almost had this feeling of remorse. I shot him. I love these animals so much. You get a little bit of this remorse. And you're like, oh man, that sucks that I had to take a life, but I'm a hunter. That's what we do. He's going to feed me. And I executed the plan perfectly. That's why he's dead.
Yeah.
Then the next thought is like, man, my season for the most part is over.
Well, I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Because in Iowa, you guys can get a second tag for muzzleloader or shotgun, right?
Right. And yes, that's true. But where I hunt, man, this isn't like a managed farm where these, what you see on TV, these guys are like, oh, late season success. Yeah, late season success on a highly managed farm with 40 acres of standing corn. Nobody leaves 40 acres of standing corn up around here or around where my farm is. Yes, there are times where maybe a cold front can move through, and I'm talking an extreme cold front where we're talking 25 degrees below zero type of weather that gets these feet on their daylight, daylight moving. It's just very, very hard to locate those deers. And, I'm not going to say it here, but my situation. There's other people in the area who have tons of food plots. And so when winter hits and after shotgun season comes through these properties, these deer leave my property and go to safe havens on other farms where there is that 40 acres of standing food.
Right. What about the little property?
Yeah, that's a good point. I had some good quote unquote luck there last year as far as seeing deer. However, they're all to the north, and it's like I would be shooting through two properties with my bow to get a shot at them. It's very hard. They don't tend to use that pinch point as much. They use the field edge on the north side of the creek, and it's very difficult. And to be honest with you, that's time for me to be doing other things to allow me to hunt the rut. They allow me to hunt maybe go on that Western trip and stuff like that.
You're telling me.
No, I know what you're saying. I'm giving up.
Yeah.
I'm not giving up. No.
How can you not hunt from November 2nd through the January 15th end? It'll be 2.5 months where people could be deer hunting, and you're going to be able to sit in your house and not feel like scratching your eyeballs out?
No, I'm going to hunt. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying that it's very difficult and very hard to do. I have 3 doe tags left that I plan to fill in the next couple weeks, actually. So I'm still going to get out and enjoy some of this, this rut. But I'm saving my vacation so I can go to some trade shows. Yep. I'm going back to that weekend warrior type status, and it's very hard late season when, if that cold front doesn't land when you're in your cubicle, or when you're not in your cubicle, then you're kind of just, you got to hit that luck stage again.
Yeah.
That cold front has to come through on a Saturday or Sunday. And if it doesn't, then you're sitting there hunting 45-degree December days, and those aren't fun to hunt.
Not ideal, that's for sure.
But yeah, it's not that I'm not going to be hunting. It's just that it just changes. You got 2 kids, and I can't sit here and say I'm not going to hunt, because I will. It's just that the opportunities as the season goes on become less and less.
Yeah. All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure you weren't throwing in the towel completely.
No, because there's still an opportunity. I'm going to be running a lot of trail cameras on my buddies, and if a big boy starts coming through, I'm going to be on him.
Yeah,
right?
Dude. Go get him. I'll tell you what, it's a good feeling when you're out there hunting and you already have your tag filled, and you've got none of that like monkey on your shoulder type pressure.
Right.
It's all bonus from here. So that'll be a nice relaxing sit when you get back out there next time.
All right, Mark.
Speaking of monkeys on backs.
Yeah, speaking of monkeys on backs and trying to relax.
Oh, man.
You want to talk, how I was saying the definition, I was prepared to grind it out,
yes,
and I had success early. You actually are grinding it out right now.
Yeah. It's
talk to us.
Yeah. Grinding, that is exactly what it is. And it started a lot earlier this year than most years for me. Usually my grind starts, Halloween or something like that. But, last time we actually talked about my hunts, that was, I had that encounter on the 24th of October where I got to full draw on Holyfield,
Yeah.
And that whole thing kind of set into motion my hunting marathon earlier than usual, because all of a sudden I started seeing Holyfield in daylight all the time. And so I was like, well, I saw him in daylight last night, better hunt tomorrow. And I saw him in daylight that night, so I better hunt the next day. Right. So since October 24th, I think I've only taken 2 days off from hunting. Right. So I'm whooped. Like I'm tired. I'm just leveling with you. I'm just like, I'm pretty exhausted right now. What is it? Today's November 8th. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So since that time, since the 24th, I've been after one deer and one deer only.
Yep.
Mr. Holyfield, and he continues to evade me. So, the 24th we talked about, I came to full draw on him, but it was just too dark. The next day he came in to the field, but got spooked by something on the road, ran back in the cover. The next day hunted a different spot. I didn't see him. I went back in the 27th. I saw him again. I took 2 days off because of warm weather. Was back in there on the 30th. Saw him again.
All right, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this a little bit, but tell us where this buck is living, and why maybe you're not able to get any more cracks at him.
Yes.
On the property that you're actually hunting.
Yeah, that's important for me to talk about, because I feel like everyone's like, how come you don't just move and kill this buck every time you see him? And I'm like, gosh, I wish I could. So here's the situation. Imagine like a checkerboard or board, and you break it up into four squares, all right? There are 4 quadrants. Okay, so the line that runs right down the middle, that is my property line. I've got the 2 quadrants on the left side. My neighbor has the 2 quadrants on the right side. So in the bottom left quadrant is the only cover I have on my side of the property in this area. I've got that food plot I planted, and I've got tall grass and then a strip of timber behind me. Now, adjacent to that, on the neighbor's side of the line to the right, so the bottom right quadrant, is some cover, like some timber. The upper right quadrant, so that would be the northeast quadrant, that is this stellar bedding, really tall grass, these brushy bushes, I don't know what they're called, but just like tremendous. And then the top left quadrant is my property, but it's just a cut bean field. It's a wide open bean field, and my property line is on the edge of that bean field. I have one tree on my side. Everything else is the neighbor's. So where I see him all the time is in the upper right quadrant, in that really great bedding. And from my tree stand in the bottom left quadrant, I can see in there really well. So on night number 1, I saw him in the right quadrant, top right. He came into the wide open bean field, chased a doe. I snort wheezed to him. He came down into the bottom left where I'm at, but you know what happened there. That's the only time he's come down to my quadrant since. That was October 24th. All the other times I've seen him back on the neighbors in that cover, except for one time, November 3rd, he actually showed up directly next to me in that bottom right quadrant, on the neighbors, in the thick cover though, at 60 yards. That's the closest he's been to me recently. And he was just staring into the food plot. And there was 2 little button bucks that had just come out. And so I was like, first I'm like, crap, did he bust me? Is he staring at me? And like for like several minutes he was just frozen. And I just barely inched my binoculars up and looked at him, and he was looking straight ahead. He wasn't like looking up at me. He was just looking into the food plot. So I think he was looking at those 2 deer, and he just sat there for a couple minutes and then turned and walked away. Now, so why I can't move is because I've got one tree in my food plot in the bottom left quadrant, and there's one tree in the top left quadrant, but it's just on this wide open bean field.
Right.
So my thought process was, all right, I've got a great setup here in this food plot. Does are still coming out to feed. I just need him to come out and follow one of these does one of these times. And I'm seeing him chasing does back in the cover. He chased the doe once out into the open bean field the one time. And the issue here is I can only hunt here with like northwest wind, something like that. Because if I have anything that blows from the east or south, it blows up into all that cover. So long story short, I'm stuck with this spot. And I see him all the time, but he's on the neighbors back in this cover, and I obviously can't hunt there. So long story short, I saw him multiple times, the 24th, the 25th. I saw him the morning of the 25th, the 27th, the 30th, and then the 3rd was the time when he was at 60 yards. I watched him then go back into the upper right quadrant, run around, chase some does in there. Then he actually, though, did pop out into the upper left quadrant. He popped out into my bean field at the very top northern border for like 10 yards and then walked into the north neighbor's property, which was a cut cornfield. So that was the 3rd. My issue was, I was at this point I was okay. I want to sit up in that one tree up in that quadrant because there are a bunch of does that are coming out to feed in there, and he has popped out there once right by that tree. And then the 24th and the 25th of October, he popped out and then worked south. One time came into my food plot, one time spooked. So I'm thinking, okay, these are my only options. I've hunted the food plot stand so many times, like the exact opposite of what you've done. You've hunted only, everything once or twice, and that's what I want to do. But I've kept hunting this stupid stand because it's the only place I can see him. Like, he's nowhere else on my farm. I'm not getting trail camera pictures of him anywhere else. I'm not seeing him anywhere else. But every time I go here, I'm seeing him.
But you're seeing him on the neighbor's farm, right?
Yes, except for 3 times. 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
3 times he's come onto my farm, but just in the edges of it. I take that back. One morning, he was right in the middle of the field running around. And then earlier in October, I had seen him in front of my food plot. But most everything was on my neighbors. So my thought process kept on being, okay, this isn't a great situation. You've hunted this stand so many darn times. I'm hunting a stupid field. It's not what I want to be doing, but I don't have any better option on this property. Like, there's no other reason to hunt anywhere or place else if he's the only buck I'm trying to kill.
Right.
And if I don't think if he doesn't know I'm here yet, which I don't know, maybe he'll follow doe. So that was my thought process, and that was kind of the noose I've hung myself on, is that I've just stuck with this one area because it's the only place I think there's a small chance of him maybe making a mistake, and I could hunt it and I knew he wasn't winding me. And the one thing that I told you before is that I've convinced my wife to come with the four-wheeler to this property and pick me up every evening.
Okay.
So I'm not spooking these deer as a person at all. And so I think because of that, I'm still seeing a lot of activity every single night. There's still deer feeding out in these fields. He's still very close to my property or popping into my property for brief periods of time. I think that if I had been walking out of this area even once or twice, I don't think that would still be happening. But I think with her driving in there and spooking these deer off with the ATV, they're just so much more forgiving of that. So the day of the November 4th, I finally had a wind that I could go hunt that tree stand up in the top left quadrant. Because again, like I said, anything westerly blows into the bedding. So I had to wait till I had something that would either be straight south, so I could go straight up the edge, or something easterly. So I finally got that the night of the 4th. I snuck in. I did a run and gun set. It was an absolute disaster. I got to my tree. Well, so first it was a quiet. It wasn't windy. It was super crunchy in the leaves. So I'm like, okay, how do I get to this tree, which is right on the edge of this bedding? I mean, the tree is right on the edge of this stuff. So I'm like, how do I get in here without spooking deer that are bedding there? Well, luckily, the neighbor was combining his fields. So I'm like, okay, I am going to wait, and I'm going to time my walk into the stand with when the combine's nearby so that they can't hear me. So I walk to the edge of the field, and I see the combine has stopped, and he's waiting to dump off his load of corn. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit here, and I'm going to wait. He'll be ready to go. Well, half hour passes, and he still hasn't started going. So I'm like, well, son of a gun, I need to get set up. But luckily, he gets going. So finally gets the combine going. I've wasted half an hour, but okay, I'm going to make sure I get in here quiet. I'm going to have a good setup. I'm not going to spook deer. So as the combine's getting close, I scurry in there. I get to the base of my tree. I'm like, okay, nothing spooked. Nothing new I was in here, at least not that I think of. The wind's great. The combine's going by. Let me hang these sticks.
Yep.
And I look at my backpack, and I realize I forgot to bring my climbing sticks.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy, Mark.
Yeah. So I had like an aneurysm, and I was like, what in the world? Like, I am the biggest idiot in the world. I got so mad at myself, but I was like, okay, I'm not going to go all the way back home. So then again, we have to give props to my blessed angel of a wife. I called her and said, hey, honey, I know I don't deserve this, but can you do me a favor? And I had her drive my climbing stakes to the tree while the combine was nearby again. So again, hoping that, you know, this vehicle coming up to the edge of this field will be just, you know, like another piece of farm equipment. So she drops off my climbing sticks. I try to hang them up in the tree. The first tree I tried to hang that I thought I was going to get hanged up in, I realized I can't because there's two big trees that are like grown together. So I didn't realize this. I can't get straps around it. So I'm like, well, son of a gun. So long story short, because this could go on and on, it was just a complete disaster. I tried to get up in like this tree, and then I realized there was one other tree I could maybe get into, so I tried to get into that one. I couldn't get into that one because it's kind of just a little cluster of trees like right in this area. And while I'm pulling the sticks down from one tree, I look over and here's a big buck coming, and it's Frazier, a 3.5-year-old. He walks to within 10 yards of me. I film it on my phone. And then he kind of realizes something's wrong and boogers out of there. Finally get in a tree, and, well, just, you know, it was a disaster. But I got in the tree for the last hour of daylight, and I saw Holyfield come out of where I think he was bedded. Mm-hmm. But he walked by like 100 yards, still in the neighbors, popped out around the other side of the field. The combine starts back up, spooks him, disappears, and, well, that's basically it. I went back again last night. I didn't see him. And that's that. I've been hunting some different places in the mornings. This property just is not good for the rut unless they're hitting my food. Right. So I've got one chunk of timber that's like my sanctuary. So it's kind of a swamp, and I just never go in there. Otherwise, it's just field edge kind of. And you know, for whatever reason, they're not in my food plots as heavy as they usually are this time. I think it's because there's been no frost. We haven't got a frost yet. So they're not hitting my brassicas because they usually don't hit those till it's cold and frosty. So, you know, they've been hitting the neighboring cornfield and my bean fields. And I don't know. It's just been tough. I can't get in the cover where he's been at. I've been hoping, you know, maybe he'll be cruising in the morning. That hasn't happened. I've never seen him on the main body of my property, just up in that one little corner. The one interesting thing that did happen to me is on our last podcast where we were talking about our rut stands that we're looking forward to.
Yep.
There was one stand I told you about that's on the backside of this swamp on a little piece of high ground that runs between CRP and the neighbors and my little swamp sanctuary. And I had set a stand on the backside right in that piece of high ground that runs in the between. And I hunted that a couple days ago, and that was an awesome morning. And I actually saw 2 of the bucks that I was considering shooting this year that were what I believe to be 3.5-year-olds, Frazier, and then another buck I'm calling Foreman.
Yep.
And I had both of them at 10 yards, and I decided to pass on both of them because it just, at this point, it's Holyfield. Like, nothing else is getting me excited. Like, I just want to kill this one deer. So had really cool encounters with them, though, and that was fun. And then I actually saw Foreman again last night, and I passed on him at 10 yards, and I saw him again this morning, and I passed on him about 20. So, you know, it's been great Michigan action. Like, it's been really cool. Like, I'm seeing these bucks, and, like, a lot of these nights that I've seen Holyfield, I've also seen Foreman, I've also seen Frazier, and I've also seen this other buck I'm calling Mayweather. So I'm seeing a bunch of nice 3.5-year-old bucks, more than I've ever seen. So, like, even though I've hunted the same place over and over, I'm seeing way more relatively mature deer, and that's exciting for the future, for sure. It's just been frustrating because my hands have been tied trying to get on this deer, and it's basically just been hoping to get lucky, hunting these fields and just hoping that maybe tonight he makes a mistake, and it hasn't happened.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Yeah, I rambled there. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Question 1, calling at him. Have you grunted? Have you snort wheezed? Have you done anything to try to get him to come to you?
Yes, good question. Okay, so the very first time I saw him, I snort wheezed, and he came into the food plot, but he was fouling 2 does. So I don't know if he was fouling, if he came in because of the call, or if he came in because of the does. So night number 1, he responded to the call. Night number 2, I tried grunting, and let me think about this. I grunted once or twice, and he looked but didn't care and kept walking by. I tried to snort wheeze again, and he kind of just like turned and trotted away. So he wasn't feeling it at all. So I'm okay. I'm like, okay, I kind of blew it. The next time I tried calling to him was when he was at that 60-yard encounter when he was right next to me. And okay, so I'd grunt at him and I'd snort wheeze at him, and he didn't like it so much. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to try that. I'm going to try doe bleat maybe. So I tried the can call. He didn't care for that. He turned and walked away. Another time I saw him pop out a little ways off. The one other time when he popped out into my field north of me a couple 100 yards, I was like, okay, I've tried all these different things. He's not feeling it. But Dan Johnson told me I need to try rattling. And even though I don't like to rattle in Michigan, damn it, I just need to try something. So I was like, I'm going to try a little light rattling. Maybe, who knows? So I tried that. He looked and then turned and walked straight back into the woods. So no call has worked. I considered trying a decoy, but I've watched him around other bucks, and he's not like super aggressive with other bucks. And I don't have a good spot to hunt with a decoy. Like the food plot stand, he wouldn't be able to see it until he's in the food plot because I've got this tall food plot screen all around it, so you can't see in or out of it. Right. So I could hunt that bean field edge with it, but the issue with that is that he needs to come into the field to see it. And if that ever happened, it would be with a bunch of does out there. And around here, I think if I put that decoy out, I'd get blown at by all those does before he'd ever pop out. And any deer that came out would probably be surprised because they'd come right out. Where they come out, they'd all of a sudden see this decoy 10 yards away from them. So it's not like they show up on the other side of the field and could see it. He could come my way. So yeah, I mean, calling hasn't worked. The decoy just doesn't seem like the smart move. And here I am. Yep.
Well, sounds to me like 2 things are going to happen. Well, first off, when is Michigan's gun season start?
November 15th.
Okay. So
and that's a week from today.
And when people hear this, you will already be on the road or have already hunted in Ohio, right?
Yep. I'm leaving for Ohio tonight.
After the hunt or after the podcast that we're recording right now?
I don't know. I was planning on hunting tonight because I thought I could hunt that corner stand one more time, the new one I hung.
Yep.
Because it was going to be a west-southwest wind, which would kind of cut the edge a little bit. I thought it might be able to cut the corner, but now it's shifted to a northwest or west-northwest, which just blows out the entire bedding area. And so I'm like, I just can't, there's just no way that'll work. if it was southwest, there was a small chance it could work. With anything northwest, it's like I can't even get in there without everything smelling me. So I could hunt the food plot fine, but that'll be like the bajillionth time I've hunted there, and that seems like low odds now. And so I don't know. Part of me says I should hunt just because you never know. Part of me says that I should just get to Ohio and get a good night's sleep so I can try to turn the page and try to make the best of this rut still.
I think you should hunt tonight. I think you should hunt Michigan and be as aggressive as you possibly can, knowing that there's a period of time between now and the time that the gun season starts. So I know you remember how Jim Shockey talked about pressure on a deer like ripples on a pond. Eventually they go away and everything becomes normal again.
Yeah.
I think that if you're aggressive tonight and you potentially spook him, like you're going to spook him or you're going to kill him type odds, right? Yeah. So let's say you spook him. By the time the gun season starts, he's going to be back to his normal routine, and there's that chance that he's still working his way on your property. So, and by that time you're gone anyway. And then by the time you come back, the rut could be over. It could be that post rut where they're looking for that last doe, or anything could happen between now and then.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but I'm that kind of person who's like, I'm going to be knowing what I know and knowing that you're going to leave for Ohio in a day or two, be aggressive. And if you fail, you tried.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that, because I have been sitting here thinking about the same thing too. And like, I don't want to sound like, well, let's just be honest. Wiener. Well, I don't want to sound like a wiener, but I want to kill this buck. To be selfish, I want to be the person to kill this buck.
Right.
And I almost want to spook him, because if he keeps acting like he's acting right now, as soon as my neighbor or one of these guys goes in there in gun season, he's dead.
Yep.
Like, he's so killable. Like, if I could hunt this stupid property, he would be so dead right now with a bow, I believe. So let alone when these guys start going in there with guns. So I almost... maybe it's not a bad idea to hunt there tonight, knowing that probably 95% chance I will blow out any deer in there, and he will probably smell me. Yep. But maybe that's what I need to do to smarten this deer up a little bit.
Right.
And then by the time I come back and try hunting him again later in November, he'll have, that's the thing I'm worried about, is he's going to get killed. But if he doesn't get killed, maybe then I do feel good if he survives gun season. I feel very good about my late season chances, because I have by far the best late season food. I've got 2 really good, great big brassica food plots that are lush and huge, and they haven't really been touched very much yet because of the fact we haven't got a frost. So I got to believe as soon as we get cold weather, they are just going to hit them so hard. And last year, I had him on trail camera during daylight in December on my late season food plot 10 times in daylight. So
bingo.
So if I can get this buck through gun season, I think he's very killable in the late season.
Right.
So that's my one silver lining. So maybe I should
I say be aggressive tonight.
Maybe just go in there and it's
rattle for 4 straight hours.
Give him a fair warning before the orange pumpkin brigade comes in.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I know that if I was planning on hunting tonight, but then just this afternoon, like when I was coming in to do this, I was like, man, tonight the drive's going to suck tonight, and I'm going to get in at like midnight. I'm going to have 4 hours of sleep. But I knew I'd feel bad about not trying still.
Does this make you feel better, Mark? I'm going to work tomorrow.
Yes.
So how about you stop whining?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
I'll tell you what, I'll go to Ohio and you can sit in my cubicle.
Okay. Point well taken. So, all right.
Just kill him.
I'm going to go in there, I'm going to set it again, and
you're going to kill him.
I'm going to try to kill him. And if I did, I might cry. I'm going to be so happy.
Well, call me, and I'll say, okay, stop being a baby for a second and thank me.
Yep.
And just say, thanks, Dan, because you told me to rattle when I thought I should.
Yep.
for an hour. Just, get 2 decoys out there. Have your wife dress up as a deer and have her fight that decoy, and just rattle and
Rah, 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 rah.
Snort wheeze the entire time.
Yeah, he's gonna come out purely just based on like insatiable curiosity. Like he just has to see what's going on out here.
You know,
I've got nothing
I can
to
just see
lose.
it now. You kill him, right? Doing something so stupid like I rattled and snort wheezed and grunted and rattled some more, which nobody ever does. And he comes in that night and you kill him. And then I can see some article written by Mark Kenyon, How I Conquered the Rut by giving advice to people. You know,
It was nothing but my genius strategy of very specific calling tactics. Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess, we'll see. Who knows?
right.
You never know.
You never know.
So that's my story. That's been my rut. It's been
I'll tell
interesting.
you, good luck.
Thank you, sir. I had one other thing that's worth mentioning. On one of the hot days, we had like a 70-degree day that I didn't want to hunt here. I went to one of those other farms I'm hunting, and I ended up having a really close call there too. You probably saw on social media, or maybe we talked about it on text, but at 10 o'clock, I spotted a shooter buck back in this big timber I was hunting, and I watched him for 4 hours locked on a doe. He bedded at 100, then I watched him get up and stalk around, and then bedded down again and stalked around. I tried calling to him a couple times, and he wouldn't come my way. And then finally at like 1:30 or between 1:30 and 2, the doe got up, and she came my way. She passed at 50 through my shooting lane. I'm like, all right, I can do that. If he passes right through there, this is game over. But he hung back like 20 yards further back, or 30 yards further back, and he passed at 77 yards. And he was a 4.5-year-old buck for sure, like just a really solid, big, nice 8-pointer.
Awesome.
So that was a cool encounter for like a 70-degree day. I wasn't really expecting much, and that just goes to show you that you never know during the rut. So
It's the rut.
yeah, you got to give it a shot during the rut because anything can happen.
Right. Start throwing Hail Marys if it's, like I'm telling people out there, hey, what about this? I only have one day left to hunt or my vacation, or you got to do whatever you can. Tear your tree stand down. Go dive into that bedding area downwind. And, if you see him and he's walking away from you, grunt at him. If he doesn't respond to a grunt, snort wheeze at him. If he doesn't respond to that, rattle at him. I mean, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, if you're down to the end of your trip, or if you don't get to hunt a bunch more or whatever, I mean, you gotta go out swinging.
Right.
So it pays to be safe and conservative and smart, but only to a point. Like if your opportunities are not going to be there anymore after this, then go for it. So that's kind of where I'm at in Michigan for the time being. So I guess I'm gonna swing.
Hey, swing for it.
All right. Well, any other final thoughts from you?
Just, to all the people who are out there grinding, man, good luck and, be safe. And man, I don't know. I think I can speak for Mark when I say we really hope as many of the listeners out there are as successful as humanly possible, unless you share the same farm as us.
Yes. I gotta tell you though, it's been super cool. Like, we've been getting a lot of tweets and Facebook messages and stuff of people thanking you and me for the podcast because it helped them in some way kill this buck or their biggest buck or stuff like that. And that's really cool to see. So very, very exciting to see that kind of stuff. So I agree. Good luck to everyone out there. And I guess as we do, I'm just gonna shut her down. We do need to thank our partners who help us keep this podcast going. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Yeti Coolers, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Maven Optics, Whitetail Institute of North America, and I think that's everyone. And I guess then finally, yes, thank you all for listening, for tuning in, for kind of joining us as we kind of share all of our ups and downs here during the rut. We'll have a new guest on here soon, so enough of me and Dan blabbing. And until next time, good luck, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.